Before Hollywood's strict censorship locked away its darkest visions, a short, chaotic era allowed filmmakers to create some of the most shocking, taboo-breaking horror ever put on screen. These pre-code nightmares didn't just frighten, they unsettled, disturbed, and lingered in the mind. Today, we count down the 13 most disturbing horror films made in pre-code Hollywood. 1. Mystery of the Wax Museum, 1933. In the shadows of Depression-era Hollywood, Mystery of the Wax Museum emerges as a chilling spectacle wrapped in lurid Technicolor hues. Directed by Michael Curtis, this film invites audiences into a grotesque world of art and obsession, where beauty is preserved not by skill, but by death. Lionel Atwill plays Ivan Igor, a sculptor whose wax figures are disturbingly lifelike because they are lifelike. The revelation that these statues encase real human bodies horrified audiences, blurring the line between artistry and murder in ways few films dared. The movie's eerie visuals, achieved through the rare two-color Technicolor process, heightened its uncanny atmosphere, making the wax figures appear at once vibrant and unsettling. Critics of the time called it macabre beyond decency, and it nearly vanished for decades, believed lost until a miraculous restoration in the 1970s. Beyond its grotesque premise, Mystery of the Wax Museum plays with societal fears, the disposability of life, the commodification of beauty, and the artist's dangerous pursuit of perfection. In an age when the production code was tightening its grip, this story dared to present horror without moral neatness, leaving its viewers shivering with unease long after the credits rolled. 2. Dr. X, 1932. Few films capture the sheer weirdness of early sound horror like Dr. X. Directed by Michael Curtis and filmed in the same rare Technicolor as Mystery of the Wax Museum, it blends murder mystery with mad science and a healthy dose of grotesque imagery. Lionel Atwill once again takes center stage, portraying the head of a medical institute plagued by a series of grisly murders committed under the light of a full moon. The investigation unfolds within the walls of a sprawling, decaying laboratory, a set design masterpiece dripping with shadows, winding staircases, and strange contraptions. The killer's identity? Revealed in a jaw-dropping climax involving synthetic flesh, deformed features, and a transformation scene so repellent that audiences of 1932 reportedly gasped aloud. What makes Dr. X disturbing even now is its tonal unpredictability. It veers from absurd humor to stomach-churning horror in moments, leaving viewers unmoored. It's a fever dream of paranoia, bodily violation, and moral decay, sealed in the eerie glow of two-tone Technicolor. The film's final act, with its monstrous reveal, still stands as one of the most grotesque moments in pre-code cinema. 3. The Old Dark House, 1932. Before haunted mansions became a cliché, The Old Dark House set the gold standard for creepy, claustrophobic horror. Directed by James Whale, fresh from Frankenstein, this Gothic gem traps a group of storm-tossed travelers inside a decaying estate inhabited by the bizarre Femme family, a clan of religious fanatics, pyromaniacs, and silent hulks. The film's horror is not driven by supernatural monsters, but by the grotesque humanity of its inhabitants. The house itself becomes a character, with flickering candlelight, looming shadows, and staircases that seem to creak in anticipation of danger. Performances by Boris Karloff as the mute, brutish butler, and Eva Moore as the deranged Rebecca Femme lend the film an unsettling unpredictability. Every interaction hints at violence or madness. While The Old Dark House features moments of humor, its real impact comes from the oppressive dread it cultivates. It's a reminder that human eccentricity, unchecked by social norms, can be more terrifying than any creature from the grave. Audiences left theaters whispering about its strange characters long after, proof of how deeply it wormed its way into the psyche. The Most Dangerous Game, 1932. Before reality television, before extreme survival challenges, there was The Most Dangerous Game, a pre-code thriller so unsettling that it still unnerves audiences nearly a century later. Directed by Ernest B. Schoedsack and Irving Pichel, and filmed alongside King Kong using some of the same sets, it tells the nightmarish tale of a shipwrecked man who washes ashore on an isolated island. There, he meets the charismatic, yet chilling Count Zaroff, a big-game hunter bored with ordinary prey. His solution? Hunt humans. The concept of man being the ultimate quarry was shocking enough, but in pre-code Hollywood, it could be presented with a grim directness that later decades wouldn't dare. Zaroff's trophy room, lined with grim reminders of past hunts, is one of the most disturbing visual reveals in early horror thriller cinema. The implication that guests are welcomed, wined, and then hunted for sport plays into primal fears. Our trust in hospitality turned lethal. Fay Wray, fresh from her Scream Queen fame, delivers a performance of genuine terror, matched by Leslie Banks's unnervingly suave menace as Zaroff. The lush jungle sets and oppressive shadows heighten the tension, making the island feel like a labyrinth of impending doom. What makes The Most Dangerous Game so disturbing isn't just the violence, it's the intellectual cruelty. Zaroff's justification for his actions, couched in twisted logic and aristocratic elegance, mirrors real-world horrors of power unchecked. By the time the climactic hunt begins, the film has already cornered the viewer psychologically, making every rustle in the underbrush feel like a threat. 5. The Invisible Man, 1933. James Whale's The Invisible Man may be remembered for its groundbreaking special effects, but beneath the technical marvel lies one of the most disturbing character studies of the pre-code era. Based on H.G. Wells' novel, the film follows Dr. Jack Griffin, a scientist who discovers a formula that renders him invisible at the cost of his sanity. From his first appearance swathed in bandages and dark glasses, Griffin exudes menace. Unlike other monsters of the time, his horror is rooted in the unchecked freedom invisibility affords. Without the constraints of being seen, Griffin embarks on a spree of violence, murder, and psychological terror. He derails trains, strangles victims, and toys with the lives of strangers, all with a manic glee that's more chilling than any jump scare. Whale injects the story with a wicked sense of humor, which paradoxically makes Griffin's cruelty even more unsettling. Claude Rains' voice performance is legendary, silky, mocking, and unhinged. There's no tragic backstory softening his evil. Griffin's descent into madness feels inevitable, his genius corrupted by the godlike power to act without consequence. Pre-code liberties allowed the film to portray acts of violence and moral decay more directly than later adaptations. Watching Griffin relish his own monstrosity forces the audience to confront a terrifying thought. Perhaps the real monster is simply a man freed from accountability. 6. Dracula, 1931. Todd Browning's Dracula, starring Bela Lugosi, wasn't just a defining moment for vampire cinema. It was one of the most sensual and unnerving films of the pre-code period. Released before Hollywood clamped down on depictions of predatory desire and death, Dracula bathed in an atmosphere of forbidden seduction. Lugosi's Count isn't merely a monster, he's a figure of hypnotic allure, blending old-world elegance with an undercurrent of menace. His slow, deliberate speech, his penetrating gaze, and the unnervingly intimate nature of his attacks gave audiences an entirely new kind of fear, the fear of surrendering to something darkly enticing. Browning's direction favors long, oppressive silences and lingering close-ups, letting the dread seep in gradually. The Gothic sets, shadow-draped staircases, and candlelit interiors create a suffocating sense of inevitability. The absence of music in key scenes only amplifies the unease, making moments of attack feel like intrusions into the audience's own space. In the pre-code era, Dracula could lean heavily into themes of possession, loss of will, and corruption of innocence without the moralistic punishments demanded later. This allowed the film to end on a note that's unsettling in its lack of true resolution. Yes, the Count is defeated, but the seductive darkness he represents feels eternal. 7. Frankenstein, 1931. James Whale's Frankenstein remains one of the most enduring and disturbing films of the pre-code era, not just for its monster, but for its willingness to confront taboo ideas about life, death, and the limits of human ambition. Based loosely on Mary Shelley's novel, the story follows Dr. Henry Frankenstein, a scientist obsessed with creating life from the bodies of the dead. His success births a towering, tragic creature played by Boris Karloff, a performance so layered it redefined screen horror. Audiences in 1931 were unprepared for the film's unsettling imagery. Lightning-lit laboratories bristling with strange machinery, stitched-together corpses, and the unforgettable moment when the monster, in a moment of childlike innocence, accidentally drowns a young girl. This scene was so shocking that many prints later had it removed entirely, only to be restored decades later. The pre-code era allowed Whale to infuse the film with philosophical questions and subtle blasphemies, most notably Henry's declaration, "In the name of God, now I know what it feels like to be God." This line was later censored, but in 1931 it underscored the story's challenge to moral and religious boundaries. The horror here isn't simply about a creature terrorizing a village. It's about the consequences of hubris, the fragility of life, and society's instinct to destroy what it doesn't understand. Whale's direction blends Gothic grandeur with moments of stark realism, making the tragedy hit harder. By the end, Frankenstein left audiences not just frightened, but unsettled by the realization that the real monster might not be the one stitched together in the lab. 8th Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, 1931. Reuben Mamoulian's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is a masterclass in transformation, both physical and moral. Starring Frederick March in a performance that won him the Academy Award, the film delves deep into the duality of man, unleashing one of cinema's most grotesque alter egos. The story follows Dr. Henry Jekyll, a respected London physician fascinated by the idea of separating the good and evil within the human soul. His experiments produce a potion that transforms him into Edward Hyde, a primitive, violent figure with animalistic features and no moral restraint. Pre-code freedoms allowed Mamoulian to depict Hyde's cruelty with startling directness. Violent assaults implied depravity, and sadistic pleasure in others' suffering. March's physical transformation, achieved with ingenious makeup and lighting tricks, was groundbreaking for its time, horrifying in its gradual reveal. Unlike later adaptations, this Hyde isn't merely brutish, he's gleefully malicious, embodying every repressed desire and dark impulse Jekyll hides behind his gentlemanly veneer. What makes the film disturbing isn't just the violence, but the idea that Hyde was always within Jekyll, waiting for permission to emerge. In the context of the early 1930s, this was an unnerving suggestion that civilization is merely a thin mask, and beneath it lies something feral and dangerous. The film's ending, in which Hyde is hunted down, provides resolution but no comfort. The monster, after all, was part of the man. Ninth Island of Lost Souls, 1932. Adapted from H.G. Wells' The Island of Dr. Moreau, Island of Lost Souls is arguably the most unsettling depiction of scientific hubris in early cinema. Directed by Early C. Kenton, it follows Edward Parker, a shipwreck survivor who washes ashore on a remote island controlled by the enigmatic Dr. Moreau, played with cold precision by Charles Laughton. Moreau's experiments, surgical manipulations that turn animals into human-like hybrids, populate the island with grotesque, tortured man-beasts. These creations, half human and half animal, live under a strict law forbidding them from killing, with the chilling chant, "Are we not men?" The makeup effects were extraordinary for their time, rendering the creatures disturbingly believable. The pre-code period allowed the film to explore disturbing themes with little restraint: bodily mutilation, the corruption of science, and the question of what truly separates man from beast. The implied bold threat toward the female lead, coupled with the perverse nature of Moreau's House of Pain, was enough to get the film banned in several countries, including the UK, for decades. Lofton's portrayal of Moreau is particularly haunting, his genteel manner masking a sadistic obsession with bending nature to his will. The horror doesn't come from jump scares, but from the oppressive realization that on this island, morality has been entirely rewritten by one man's twisted curiosity. By the end, when the man-beasts turn on their creator, the film leaves you with a lingering unease, not relief, because the terror was never just the creatures. It was the mind that made them. 10. Murders in the Zoo, 1933. If there's a single pre-code horror film that revels in sheer cruelty, it's Murders in the Zoo. Directed by A. Edward Sutherland and starring Lionel Atwill in one of his most sadistic roles, the film opens with a scene that left 1933 audiences shocked into silence. A man's mouth sewn shut as punishment for flirting with another man's wife. That man's wife, of course, belongs to Atwill's character, an obsessive, jealous zoologist named Eric Gorman. From that opening, the film never lets up. Set against the lush backdrop of a public zoo, Gorman uses the very animals he studies as instruments of murder. Tigers, snakes, and alligators become silent accomplices in his crimes, turning the zoo's exotic beauty into a jungle of lurking death. The pre-code era allowed these deaths to be portrayed with unsettling creativity. Lingering shots of writhing snakes, teeth bared in shadows, and victims meeting their end in ways that felt terrifyingly plausible. What's truly disturbing is Gorman's calm demeanor. Atwill plays him not as a raving madman, but as a calculating predator, a man who uses his charm as camouflage for his violence. The juxtaposition of smiling elegance and sudden brutality makes each act of murder feel like a betrayal of the audience's trust. In later decades, censors would never allow the frank depiction of animal attacks or the implication of sadistic pleasure in orchestrating them that Murders in the Zoo delivers. The film remains a vivid example of how pre-code horror could blend elegance, exoticism, and outright savagery, leaving viewers unsure whether they'd just watched a crime drama or a waking nightmare. 11. The Black Cat, 1934. Edgar G. Ulmer's The Black Cat is a hypnotic, dreamlike descent into gothic depravity, and perhaps the most stylishly disturbing film Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi ever made together. Though it shares a title with Edgar Allan Poe's short story, the film's plot is entirely original, a twisted tale of revenge, war trauma, and satanic ritual. Lugosi plays Dr. Vitus Werdegast, a man seeking vengeance against Karloff's Hjalmar Polzig, an architect who betrayed him during the war. The betrayal is not merely political, it's deeply personal, involving the theft of Werdegast's wife and the desecration of her memory. Polzig now lives in a stark, modernist mansion built on the ruins of a World War I battlefield, its gleaming walls hiding literal skeletons in the cellar. Ulmer's direction is a masterclass in atmosphere. The set design blends Bauhaus minimalism with Gothic unease, and shadows stretch like claws across sterile white surfaces. The most infamous scene, Polzig's satanic ceremony, slipped past censors only because the production code had yet to fully clamp down. There's also a notorious moment of implied necrophilia, something unimaginable in Hollywood just months later. The horror here isn't about jump scares, it's about psychological rot, the perverse beauty of cruelty, and the idea that true evil can hide behind elegance. The Black Cat lingers with you because it feels like a nightmare half remembered, where beauty and corruption intertwine so tightly you can't separate them. 12. Freaks, 1932. Tod Browning's Freaks might be the most notorious film of the pre-code era, a work so unsettling that it destroyed Browning's career and was banned in multiple countries for decades. Set in a traveling circus, it tells the story of a beautiful trapeze artist, Cleopatra, who conspires to marry and poison a kind-hearted sideshow performer, Hans, for his inheritance. The cast includes real-life sideshow performers with physical differences, something that gave the film authenticity but also fueled controversy. Browning never portrays them as objects of ridicule. In fact, the freaks are the moral center of the story. The true monsters are Cleopatra and her strongman lover, Hercules, whose cruelty sparks the film's infamous climax. That climax, set in a rain-soaked night, with the sideshow troupe crawling through the mud, faces lit by flashes of lightning, still chills modern audiences. Armed with knives, chains, and sheer determination, they enact a revenge so primal and relentless it feels less like a scripted scene and more like a glimpse into humanity's most ancient instincts. The film's use of real performers blurred the line between documentary and horror, leaving some audiences feeling complicit in their discomfort. MGM executives were so horrified by early test screenings that they cut nearly 30 minutes of footage. Footage now lost, said to be even more disturbing. Even in its truncated form, Freaks forces viewers to confront their prejudices, asking who the real outsiders are. The answer, disturbingly, is that the so-called normal people can be far more monstrous than those they mock. 13. The Mask of Fu Manchu, 1932. When it comes to sheer audacity, The Mask of Fu Manchu might be the most unrestrained, jaw-droppingly wild, pre-code horror adventure ever released by a major Hollywood studio. Directed by Charles Brabham and starring Boris Karloff in one of his most exotic and sinister roles, the film is a fever dream of sadism, erotic menace, and imperial paranoia, all wrapped in the trappings of pulp adventure. Karloff plays the diabolical doctor. Fu Manchu, a brilliant but ruthless mastermind seeking the sword and mask of Genghis Khan, relics he believes will grant him power to unite the East against the West. Opposing him is a British expedition, led by a cast of square-jawed heroes and resourceful heroines. What follows is an escalating series of traps, tortures, and psychological games that make even the most sadistic villains of the era look tame. The pre-code freedoms allowed Brabham to stage scenes that are shocking even by today's standards. There's the infamous torture device, a mechanical table studded with spikes that slowly descends toward its victim. There's the scene where Fu Manchu orders a female captive to be prepared for my pleasure, a line so overtly suggestive it was censored in later releases. And then there's Karloff's performance, delivered with a sly, venomous charm that makes every line feel like a promise of doom. Visually, the film is a riot of exotic sets and elaborate costumes, blending Art Deco with faux Oriental grandeur. The lighting drapes Karloff's face in ominous shadow, his eyes gleaming with both intelligence and malice. The film's racial caricatures are, of course, deeply problematic by modern standards, but they also speak to Hollywood's willingness at the time to exploit fears of the foreign other for maximum sensationalism. The final showdown is as over-the-top as the rest. Lightning, sword fights, last-minute rescues, and Fu Manchu's dramatic vow that he will rise again. It's part horror, part adventure serial, part fevered hallucination, and all of it is steeped in the anything-goes ethos of the pre-code era. If you want the wildest, most outrageous example of how far 1930s Hollywood could push taste, morality, and sanity before the censors stepped in, this is it. From twisted science to human hunting grounds, these pre-code horrors thrived in the shadows before Hollywood censors slammed the door. Which of these classics would you dare to watch in the dark? If you love exploring cinema's boldest chapters, subscribe and join us for the next deep dive.